If you use the internet on a daily basis, and chances are you do, you probably don't put much thought into cybersecurity. You know, your network connections, the pages you visit, the files you download. You should be thinking about these all the time. Welcome to And Security for All. Your host is Kim Hakim. We're here to help you understand, in general terms, how and why your cybersecurity should be kept in check. Now, here is Kim Hakim.
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Kim Hakim, your host. If this is your first time tuning into the show, welcome to another episode of And Security for All. And of course, welcome back to our regular listeners. Well, it's officially spring. I hope someone out there is enjoying some spring weather here in the Midwest. It is a chilly 53, and I think that is actually our high for the day and the weekend. So anyway, as many of you know, I am also the CEO of FutureCon Events. We put on cybersecurity conferences all over North America. We are excited that we are heading out to the Baltimore, DC next week for another live event. And then the week after, we're heading to Detroit. All of our events right now are being run in a hybrid mode. So not only do we get to see everyone out there in person, we still can stay connected with all of our virtual viewers and all those people that are still not comfortable coming out in person. So please go check out FutureCon Events, and there's a good chance that we're probably coming to a city near you. So today we're going to continue talking about nation state attacks and what's going on in Russia. And why haven't we seen more cyber attacks since everything has been happening with Ukraine and Russia? At least we're not hearing about them. But what might we expect in the future? How do we prepare for any sort of attack on our infrastructure when it comes to power, water? How do we know our money is going to be secure? How do companies ramp up their security? And how do we actually, as individuals, ensure our own cybersecurity? Very excited for my guest today. We're going to be discussing all of these topics. He was recently, a couple of days ago, he's been on the news all over the place, but I caught him on the news talking about this very topic. Morgan Wright, he's the SentinelOne Chief Security Advisor, and he's also a Cyberterrorism Cybercrime Analyst for Fox Business Network and many other national news outlets. He's been a big supporter of FutureCon, and we are happy to have our friend back on the show today. Welcome to the show, Morgan.
Yeah, always a great time to be on, Kim. These are exciting times for a variety of reasons, but I just want to say something right out the front. These are tough times too, because this is a tremendous humanitarian tragedy. No matter what I say here, nothing is ever said to make light of anything that's going on there, but there's some interesting observations we're going to have because of what's going on in Russia. So this is for the Ukrainian people out there, and hopefully to have them stay strong and be able to respond to all of this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I usually throw that in. It's, what are we now? 5 weeks into this?
Yeah, a little over a month now. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we can't forget about them, and I think about it every day. What would we do if it was us? If we had to all of a sudden pack up, head to Canada, leave everything, what would you take? What would you do? What a crisis. How sad. So, yeah, our hearts do go out to all the Ukrainians and for their safety. And hopefully they're finding, they're finding a place to stay and live, as simple as that. So.
Right. Well, and this is going to highlight some of the stuff we're going to talk about, because if you look at what creates these humanitarian crises, and especially in war zones, there's basically two things that are very important for a country. That's power and that's water. If you want to bring a nation to its knees, you go after two things: power and water. Power takes different forms. It can take the form of electricity flowing to homes. It can take the form of gas. It can take the form of oil, whatever it is. So if you want to bring a nation to its knees, you go after those two things. And those are the two things, as we talk, Kim, that concern me about what's at risk here in the United States, what's at risk around the world. But there are some things to counterbalance that as we talk. So there'll be some issues around NATO. I've got a couple of theories about why I think Russia has not used some of their probably bigger cyber weapons in Ukraine. And I wrote an article for the Daily Mail, came out about 3 weeks ago, and I talked about this is the beginning of a future Cold War in Russia, and this Cold War will be fought primarily in cyberspace.
I was telling you pre-show that we were out in Los Angeles doing an event the day that this happened, and I stayed out in LA and had the news on the whole weekend. And it was interesting because there was, lots of speculation about what was going to happen with cyber attacks, and there was even one that said there's a big one out there. So I was waiting and waiting to see what it was. Never heard of anything. Why are we not? What do you think is happening, and why are we not seeing this? Right out of the gate cyber attacks that we know of happening.
That we know of. Well, there's a couple reasons. Here's the first. One of the first things is recently Russia just launched their hypersonic missile. It goes 10 times the speed of sound. It's obviously something very difficult to defend against. We knew they were building something. We weren't sure what. But once a weapon system like that is out there, we can start gathering intelligence on it. We can start developing countermeasures. We can start directing, targeting officers at the CIA and the NSA. They will start targeting things to collect intelligence on so we can make estimates about. But from flash to bang, from the minute we see it till the minute we get countermeasures, it's a very long time. One of the reasons I don't think we're seeing the big tools unleashed in Ukraine is a couple things, probably three things. Number one is Russia and Putin the war plan is not going according to what they thought it would. I mean, there's an old maxim of war. I think it was a Prussian general said, your battle plan never survives initial contact with the enemy, but it is going nowhere near to plan. So I don't think they were able to use it. Now, they did use what's called IPB, intelligence preparation of the battlefield. So before this, we started seeing signs that something was happening. We started seeing denial of service attacks. Our team at SentinelOne, our Sentinel Labs, we actually discovered a new wiper malware, and actually CISA put out an alert on that, crediting the SentinelOne lab, the Sentinel Lab folks. They did a great job. As this was going on, it was going in and wiping out the operating system. So you see this kind of preparing the battlefield. So, but see, the difference is once that software was out there, it was able to be collected. Now, Ukraine has joined the NATO Cyber Defense Center of Excellence over in Estonia. They are now what's called a cooperating partner. They're not a member of NATO, but they are a cooperating partner. So that means all of that malware, all of that software gets pulled into the NATO Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, and it gets analyzed. And so before that's able to go, let's say, into other places or attack other NATO countries especially, we now understand the indicators of compromise. We've got their tools, their tactics, and so we're able to develop countermeasures to be able to scan for that happening. So now flash to bang is not years and months. It's now, weeks, a couple days. That's one of the reasons why I think they're holding on to their big old tools, because this is foreshadowing what I think is a coming Cold War with Russia in cyberspace. Back on February 26th, the Deputy Secretary of NATO came out and he said they consider cyber to be an operational domain, and they say a massive cyber attack, now the key word is massive, a massive cyber attack will invoke Article 5 of the NATO doctrine. I think it's actually called the Washington Treaty. Everybody's now experts on NATO and Article 5, but it would trigger a Article 5 response. So here's the dirty little secret, and this is the reason I'm tying all this together. Russia is a tier one adversary from an offensive capability, but I describe Russia and China as well too. They're tier one adversaries, but I describe them as M&Ms. They're hard and crunchy on the outside, but they're soft and chewy on the inside with a big nut right in the middle. Xi Jinping and Putin. They're, especially Putin right now, but they have a worry, and there is a very real problem for them. And here's the thing that ties this together. I was talking to a friend of mine that I used to do a lot of news segments with when she was a reporter and hosted her own show on Fox News. Generally, we're working on a project. And I was telling her about this. I said, as a reporter, as somebody in the news, if the whitehouse.gov site had gone down for a couple hours, how newsworthy would that have been? She said, we would have mentioned something. What about if it was 2 days? Definitely that gets people attention. What if it was nearly 2 weeks? That's huge, because that gives you an indication is that if you cannot keep your website up and running, how do the American people trust you then to defend us against these cyber attacks? So Anonymous says, hey, we're going to get involved in this. We're now going to become part of the Ukraine resistance, just like in World War II, the Dutch resistance, the French resistance. We're going to be part of the resistance. We're going to launch some attacks. They launched a denial of service attack against Kremlin.ru. I think it took over 11 days before it could actually fully function again. So, Kim, the reason I say that is you start tying this all together. They've got issues with trying to launch some of their major weapons because A, we'll get a hold of them, we'll be able to understand what it is they're doing. B, they've got to be careful because if they invite a response because of if NATO determines it to be a massive attack, then they get hammered by I think it's 36 nations. So I don't think they want that. But I think the third thing is they're holding a lot of this in reserve for this coming Cold War. So Russia is strategically better positioned from a strategic standpoint than they are a tactical standpoint right now in cyberspace. So kind of a long way around, but if you put all of these things together, you start getting a reason why they're not launching a lot of this stuff in Ukraine right now.
Well, before we go on to the next question, let me just do a quick shout out to some of our listeners that are in the chat box. Spencer, thanks for being here. Gresham, yeah, we don't know what that background noise is, but Jonathan Kimmett says he doesn't hear anything. And there was Vashni. Thanks, everyone. We love that you come tune in every day. But Jonathan has a question for you. He's the CISO over at the University of Tulsa. He said, do you believe that cyber disinformation as a tactic is being used?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, one of the things that you saw that just came out in a form of cyber, and this is something I actually wrote about in 2018 when I was writing for The Hill. Deep fake videos. Deep fake. The first one of Volodymyr Zelensky. Got to be careful. There's Vladimir and Volodymyr. So Volodymyr Zelensky came out where he was saying that, hey, we're going to surrender. Everybody quit fighting and doing stuff. Now they were able to determine that as a piece of manipulative. It's basically it's malign influence. It's deceptive. It's offensive in the sense is that it's trying to get you to stop doing something. People say, well, it's a fake. Everybody knows it's a fake. But we've got to put that into context. It's not such the question that it's a fake. It's the question is that if you tell, it's basically the whole thing is that the old saying is like Mark Twain said, and it's based on some other stuff, but a lie makes it halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to lace up its boots. It doesn't matter that it's found out 2 hours later or 2 days later. If it has an impact and it stops somebody operationally from making a decision, and my thing was, imagine somebody's telling it looks like a general, like in a U.S. Army command saying, hey guys, hold off on the attack, we're not going to do anything. And that gives the adversary enough time to launch a preemptive strike. Or you've got somebody using deep fakes to threaten people to say, look, if you don't do this for us, we're going to kill your family. Well, it's a deep fake videos of the families. This is the stuff that concerns me. It only has to be good enough to achieve an intended result. And so this is the first of many things I think that are coming out right now. There's Sun Tzu said, all warfare is deception. And so there will be deception in cyberspace. There will be deception through the use of deep fake videos. There will be deception on the battlefield itself, looking like you're going to come one direction when you actually come the other. Normandy, the invasion, D-Day was an absolute total deception. They thought we were going to land at Pas de Calais, and we actually came in to Normandy. So all warfare is deception, Kim. And to his point, Jonathan's point, by the way, my sister got married in Tulsa in the Oral Roberts Towers back when it was called the Oral Roberts Tower. So I do have a connection to Tulsa. But yeah, Kim, this is the first of many things we will see as they try new tactics. And some of these tactics don't have to be offensive. They can merely be deceptive and achieve an intended result. And while Kim's coming back, I see one more question here too. How much, and Spencer asks, how much do you think drones are being used in the war? They're being used all the time. In fact, Spencer, I will tell you, thanks to Elon Musk and through Starlink, they're actually now able to use the Starlink network in order to do command and control of the drones so that they can drop these. You've got these kamikaze drones that are basically bomb-laden, explosive-laden drones that are taking out tanks. You've got them doing reconnaissance. What they've got is they're using basically a spotter like they do with the sniper. You've got a spotter and you've got the actual sniper. So they have a scout drone that's going out, laying out the battlefield, and then they're bringing in the armed drone to come down and do that. And because they're able to use the Starlink terminals and get back up, they're actually able to. This is what's interesting about this, and I say that's why I caveated at the front. When I start talking like this, I am not in any way diminishing from what's going on over there. Anybody who's been in war, anybody who's been in those kind of situations, nobody wants it. But what we're seeing here, it's the first my friend Christopher Lockhead, great guy. You got to read his book. Him and two other guys, Play Bigger. He's a fabulous CMO. This is the first truly digital war. Zelensky is using digital. Putin is still analog, and part of that digital stuff is the use of Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat, whatever it is. The way he's communicating, he is getting past all of the other stuff, and these drones are an example of it. They've got other types of things that they're doing. In fact, to that point, because the Russians took out so much of the infrastructure, the cell tower infrastructure, and they're an analog type of army, their secure communication system, I think it was called VAR, they couldn't operate anymore. So they had to go to unsecured communications. Those unsecured communications, the Ukrainian army was able to hone in on it. They've now killed a couple high-ranking generals and some battlefield commanders because they were able to zero in on the coordinates of those talking. So you've got drones being used out there. You've got social media is being used in a way that's never been done before. Zelensky, if this were an analog war, he would not have the ability to get his message out like the way he's doing now. So I think this is totally doing. And, Spencer brings up a point too. I always thought you could use a jammer to take the drones out. Let me tell you, that would be the case, except for the fact is that Russia has these huge logistical problems. They have stalled. They're, according to the intelligence reports you get, and I've got a couple buddies inside DOD. They share non-classified information, but it's not the stuff that makes it out to the news. But they're stalled on a lot of fronts. Their supply lines suck. You've got the cyber partisans in Belarus that are working to take out their railways because the railways are all automated. They're connected. And so the ability to interfere with those and keep those things back. And Spencer talks about that's why they wanted Tor off the grid, absolutely Tor, the onion router network, which forms the backbone basically of the dark web. By the way, here's a trivia question for everybody out there. Does everybody know who invented basically Tor? Do you know who the inventor of Tor was? We'll see that if anybody can come up with it, because it may surprise you.
I am back.
Hiya.
Whatever that noise was, I got. This is just, thank God you don't have to deal with this in national news. But go ahead. They're going to mute me. You keep talking.
Yeah, no. So I was saying, so Tor was invented by the Naval Research Laboratory. And the reason it was invented, exactly what Jonathan was or Spencer was getting at, is so that you could have people communicate securely. People who were human rights activists, our military, our intelligence people that are out in the field, our operatives that are out in the field, our case officers with the CIA. It was designed to do that. And because it could not be, it was very difficult at that time, even today, to track where it is because you've got so many entry and exit points. So he didn't want that kind of capability. As well, too. Yeah, the Navy, DOD, very good guys, absolutely. Naval Research Laboratories. I did a speech one time. I actually got to meet one of the guys who worked on Tor. And it started about 96, I think it was, with some of the work that they were doing. But here's another piece of trivia. Had it not been for Bitcoin, there would have not really been a good way to monetize the dark web as it is now. So Bitcoin came along and Silk Road and all that other good stuff, too. So here's another good question, too, from Jonathan. Being early in the use of cyber tactics in war, do you believe there will be a Geneva Convention-like result for cyber activities? There already is supposed to be some kind of agreement in terms of what you will attack and what you won't attack, but here's the problem. Any type of an agreement that is enforceable requires the moral leadership of that country to follow through on it, regardless of the impact. So if you agree to the Geneva Convention, if we agree that you do prisoners like this, in fact, one of the things I thought, this is one of those things that is a gray area. And according to the Geneva Convention, you're not supposed to use gratuitous pictures of dead bodies or prisoners of wars, which I thought Ukraine was using effectively in one way, too. They created a website. The URL just spaced out for a second, but they created a website where Russian families could go see if one of their loved ones was killed or captured. And so they say, the Geneva Convention was supposed to prevent that. Geneva Convention prevents the use of cluster bombs. Geneva Convention, but again, if you illegally invade a country, like Russia's doing right now, you probably aren't going to follow the Geneva Convention. So I would think that, will there be a Geneva Convention on the use of certain things? Like there should be. It should follow the same rules for kinetic activity. In other words, you don't target civilian populations. You don't target life safety things. but they're going to go after power. Again, I go back to, they're going to go after power. They're going to go after water. They're going to take those two things out, and they're going to try and keep them. That's how you bring a nation to its knees. So I think that, will there be? Yes. Do I believe Russia or China will follow it? Absolutely not. So, Kim, I mean, there would be here's another interesting thing too. Would there be you could have a cyber war crime charge, but it would be under the Geneva Convention. It would be under the International Criminal Court that would prosecute war crimes if, in fact, the use of cyber violated the Geneva Convention and resulted in crimes against humanity, or what they would consider to be war crimes.
Well, I don't know if I'm having technical difficulties, but hopefully you can hear me loud and clear now. Yep. So thanks for, luckily I'm with a pro here that can pick up when we have technical issues, but you've had quite a lot of questions. Did you answer Jonathan's last question about it being interesting?
Yeah.
And that is, why now? Why now is everyone talking about Article 5, and why wasn't this planned prior to this Russian attack? I mean, because isn't there still a lot of question if it will become an Article 5, violation if there's a cyber attack?
So it goes back to the definition of what is the definition of massive as far as NATO is concerned, and quite frankly, it's whatever NATO says massive is. So that's why I think Russia, from a strategic standpoint, a strategic adversary, is much better suited than they are tactically in cyberspace, because a tactical response that would be massive I think they would have to give a lot of ground, but you would reach the point. It's called the fallacy of the beard. So when I was in college, I learned this in my logic class, my philosophy class, had a great professor. We had these discussions. So it's like what I have here, not a bit, I keep it kind of trim, but at what point does a hair constitute a beard? Exactly what hair constitutes a beard? That's very subjective. But from an objective standpoint, we can finally go, yep, you've got a beard. I don't know what hair made it, but now you've got a beard. Well, what's massive? I don't know, but at some point we're going to sit back and we're going to go, that's a massive attack. We're responding. The problem in cyberspace, it's so subjective, it's very hard to describe what a massive attack is, but the use of nuclear weapons, use of chemical weapons, use of biological weapons, those are red lines. Those are things that are easy to say it's a red line. And so what it's going to be to invoke Article 5, that's going to be up to NATO to talk about. And we're talking about war crimes too. Jonathan asked, would it be against the leadership or the technician that ran the tool? It could be against both. In fact, if you go back to the Nuremberg trials, you could not get out of being prosecuted for war crimes and for the people who ran the concentration camps and killed over 6 million Jews. You don't get out of it by just simply say, I was following orders. Now, there were some people who received lesser penalties, but there were a lot of people that were shot or hanged because of these war crimes, simply saying I was following orders. Now, that's the problem now with cyberspace. All I did was I wrote one piece of code. I had no idea where it was going. I don't think we're going to go to that extent. I think what you do is you start at the top and you work your way down. So I think you would definitely go after, if that's the case, I could see the International Criminal Court bringing charges against Vladimir Putin. Then you go to the next level of leadership. You go to the generals. You'd go to the FSB or the GRU. The military is definitely involved in this, or the SVR, their intelligence organs, and look at what are those doing and go after the leadership there. So in situations like that, when you're prosecuting somebody, it's like going after drug cartels. You work your way up, you flip people to work your way up, but you're going after the head of the snake. So you're working your way down the organization. You want to take out the head of it and work your way down. And actually it was Russia, and it was, I just spaced out his name. So no, it was during the war too. Stalin said, if you want to motivate the colonels, if you want to motivate the troops, you shoot a few colonels. Khrushchev even said that too. So there is a way to motivate people not to commit war crimes. And I think the thing you're seeing with this, not just on the battlefield, I think in cyberspace, we're seeing visible evidence of people saying, no, you've got soldiers defecting. You've got people not following through on certain orders. So I think we will see some kind of a thing like that comes out. But what's interesting about this whole series of events is this is the first major conflict where we've seen the use of cyber be a component, basically an operational component of the war planning. It's not just, we did a little bit of that in the Gulf War. We did some of that. But when when you're going against somebody like, say, ISIS, or the Taliban, you don't have the same. They're not a nation state. You don't have the same kind of technical capabilities that a China or a Russia does, or folks like that. Now, the other thing we have to worry about is Belarus. Will Belarus get involved? How will that complicate the issue, and everything that's connected? So, Kim, I mean, we could go 100 different ways on this. Hopefully, I haven't taken it too far afield here.
Well, I'm going to go a different way. So, what lessons do you think we learned from the Estonia attack? That, what do you think? I mean, we've seen their president has been on the news talking about everything that happened to them with that Russia attack. Is there anything that we've learned from that?
Yeah, we learned that you pick on a little country like that, they can actually become a huge pain in your ass. And now the Cyber Defense Center of Excellence is based where? It's based in Estonia. Estonia got religion. Estonia started saying, hey, look, we will never let this happen again. And so you now have somebody who's motivated to develop a lot of new capabilities to become this center of excellence for NATO. So you've got all of the people in there. You're bringing now Ukraine in there. So the great thing about having Ukraine in there is you've got this feed now from the battlefield and in cyberspace bringing information back. So I think a bad thing that happened to Estonia was being attacked by Russia. Russia didn't game this out. I think they thought, just as this one, and I've seen reports where everybody thought, Putin thought that they would cross the border, and in 24 hours, everybody was saying, oh, it's rainbows and unicorns. We're glad you're here. They're going to surrender. It didn't happen that way. Estonia didn't walk away from this either. They said, look, we may be small, but you picked on the wrong dog for this fight, and we're going to do what we can. And even for a small nation, I think they're under 2 million. They're punching well above their weight right now.
Well, that's awesome, obviously. And what do you think that we, back to what I was talking about earlier, is the smaller businesses, or even the mid-sized businesses, the people that don't have the resources, like, the huge global companies. What do you think that they should be, or what are they doing to ensure, they're ramping up their security?
So let me preface that by saying the recent announcement that came out from the White House that's saying, look, the Russians are scanning our systems and you people should ramp up your security. That's a disservice. And I do ones and zeros. I don't do R's and D's. It's a disservice for this reason, because there's a lot of people out there already struggling to keep up. It's not about ramping up. I mean, if you're not already where you need to be, I mean, it's like being in Florida. The hurricanes are on the coast and you're thinking, oh, maybe I should put shutters on my door. I need to wait for the government to tell me to put shutters on my door, have water, have a generator for backup, and do these other things. No, I don't need to be told that. What I do need is I need specific information. If there's something actionable, if there's something credible, I need to know that, but just don't give me this generic warning. I say that to say this part, which is most businesses don't overdo it. I mean, don't overthink it. We're not storming the beaches at Normandy here. This is the discussion I was having earlier. I was told you with Jenna Lee. I said, look, this is really about just, you need to assess on a regular basis your readiness. And I'm looking at it from my standpoint. Can I survive until services are reconstituted? Do I have a 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 day supply of food? What about fuel? What about a generator? It doesn't matter if it's a cyber attack or whatever else, whether it's a terrorist attack. The impact to me is the same. I lose power, I lose water. So small businesses, medium businesses should always constantly just be assessing their readiness. If we were to be hit with X, are we ready to respond? If not, why not? What do we need to fix? What's within our control? Do we have the budget? Can we invest in new technology? Can we do, are there certain things that we can do? Constantly evolving, but to run around as Chicken Little saying the sky is falling, we got to get ready because we're going to be attacked by the Russians. It reminds me of a movie, Men in Black, if you guys have seen that, with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, where Will Smith is brought into the command center. I think it's Rip Torn, and they're in there, and he says, there's these threats coming out. We're going to attack you. He said, are we under attack? He goes, son, we're always under attack. We are always being scanned. We are always being scanned by adversaries. They're always probing for weakness. None of that has stopped. So I think the mindset we need to have is, are we constantly prepared? You cannot stay at such a heightened state of alert for so long. I tell you that from military, from law enforcement days. You can only stay at a heightened state of alert for so long because fatigue sets in. Even in your teams, if you say, we got to ramp up, we're going to 24/7 operations, doubling the staff, we want everybody here, everybody's working 12-hour shifts now when you used to be working 8, that doesn't last very long. if you're not prepared for it, if you haven't done this. So all these businesses need to do is it's the fundamentals, making sure stuff's up to date, making sure you're running the latest versions, especially of your firmware too. Don't forget those types of things. Are there up? Here's the other thing too, Kim. When I was the head of I was global industry solution manager for public safety and homeland security at Cisco for several years, and so I was working with governments and with other partners building solutions. I can't tell you how many times I went in and people did not realize. Sometimes the account managers neglected to tell the customers they had additional capability that they never switched on. Sometimes you got to go back and do an inventory of what's already in your backyard. Go into your backpack and see, have I already got the supplies there? Have I already got the capability there? That's one of the first things I would do is take inventory, take stock. Don't overthink the problem. Just constantly assess your readiness. Make sure that even as a person that you can operate, how does your business operate? And I'll give you a real quick story on this too. I get a call 2 days ago from my daughter. She's killing it at this company called Employee Navigator. They do healthcare brokerage. She calls me. She says, "Dad, is there a cyber attack?" I said, "No, not that I know of." Well, because all of our internet is down at where she works at over in Maryland. And one of my first thought was, okay, just let's troubleshoot this for a minute. Who else is out? Only a couple people. Let's go to Down Detector, a couple other resources. Do you see anything there? No. Well, it turns out it was an accident. Something, they're doing construction not too far from there, I believe. Somebody hit it. But my point was to them is, what is your sense of readiness? Are you able to operate outside that office? We found this with COVID. We found this with other stuff. So it's just simply, can you operate regardless of the circumstances and continue to operate? Everybody plans for disasters. That's why they'll call it disaster plan. Nobody has a catastrophe plan. It's very hard to plan for catastrophes, but disaster planning is nothing more than, have we thought through all of the things that, as opposed to thinking about everything that could happen, do capability planning. Don't do scenario based. Well, if we get attacked by ransomware, what do we do here? Instead, understand your capabilities. What capabilities do we have? And then regardless of what happens, how would we apply our known set of capabilities to solve an attack like this? If we get breached, what would we do here? Too many people do scenario-based planning as opposed to capabilities-based planning. You go to war with what you have. If I've got a certain rucksack full of capabilities, then I need to understand what I'm going to do now.
It's interesting what just came out from the White House, and I was listening. Of course, I'm a news person. I'm always listening to the news, and they were talking this morning. Are people going to start running out and buying out all the food and the water? Because, we have had kind of a little bit of a scare tactic, but I kind of relate it to when the whole storm happened in Texas, and all those people were caught off guard. Back then, I was like, I better be prepared with water, wood, food, which I'm probably not as much as I should. I was back then because I was a little nervous at the moment that I better be prepared. So is it, I kind of guess it goes right with what you're saying. You should be prepared before, you start, freaking out because you're not ready for what's going to come. But again, is there a lot of, what's your thoughts on, living in a world by throwing fear out there? That's like the whole toilet paper thing with COVID, all of a sudden everybody was out of toilet paper.
Well, I'll give you, here's a real world example. Go back to the Colonial Pipeline hack and how people reacted to that. I live on the East Coast, and Jonathan, I see your question there. I'll get to that in a second about cyber insurance. See the Colonial Pipeline hack. Look at how people responded to a perceived shortage of fuel. There was no shortage of fuel. We did not lose any fuel. Nothing disappeared. It was just a perceived shortage because the administrative systems, the ability to distribute it, were impacted for a few days. But we had people running out, putting gas in plastic bags. To your point, name me one symptom of COVID that caused me to have to hoard toilet paper. There's no symptom of COVID required me to hoard toilet paper, but yet we got this cognitive bias basically in our mind that says we have to do something. This group mentality, this mob mentality kicked in, and we went out and did it. And that is one of my biggest concerns. If we have something really impactful hit us from a cyber standpoint or even a weather standpoint, is how will people react to that, to what is perceived as opposed to what is real? Because if you perceive it to be real, in your dreams, if you think you're falling, it feels like you're falling. So what is perceived as real? I think it all goes back to is that if you plan, if you just constantly assess your readiness, if you say, no matter what happens, we're going to be prepared to respond with the capabilities that we have, I think you're better off. I just think it's a disservice to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And look, I used to be in the consulting business too when I got out of law enforcement. Was it Unisys? Was it Bearing Point? They say good consultants spread FUD. I think that's a disservice. I think what you have to do is walk people through the realities. You take the world as you find it, not as you wish it was. So the world as we find it right now, if you're waiting for the government to come rescue you, you are in a bad position. The government, if something really bad happens, like when that weather you talked about, Kim, in Texas, the government does not have the capability to respond to everyone. They can respond to anyone. They just cannot respond to everyone. So what is your plan to survive and to be able to continue to operate until services get reconstituted, till services get restored? We ought to be having more of that mentality, and it ought to be as my plans do not depend upon the government doing something in 24 hours. I expect that I will have to go 72 to 96, or beyond that. I will have to go 5 to 7 days on my own in order to be able to operate. So I just think it's more of, we got to get back to the way they used to have to think. Imagine how tough it was living out on the prairies that came from Kansas. What was it like back there in the 1860s, 1870s, where it was days between seeing somebody or took you a long time to go into town? Hey, real quick, let me answer Jonathan's question. We're already seeing, he said he would expect that any cyber attacks at the moment will not be covered by cyber insurance. Yeah, there's things like force majeure. There's things that they may invoke if it's an act of war, act of terrorism. But I see cyber insurance already taking a hit because of ransomware. I mean, you saw, again, I'm trying to remember the name, over in France, they quit insuring those attacks. They said, sorry, we cannot from a risk management point, we cannot, in our actuarial point, we cannot quantify the risk effectively from a business standpoint to where we can charge the right kind of premiums in order to insure the risk. So you're already seeing cyber insurance going away. Now, will there be a government program in case something like that happens? Here's an interesting point too. I have a buddy of mine, him and I, Steve Murphy, if you've ever watched Narcos on Netflix, he was one of the 2 DEA agents that helped bring down Pablo. We have a podcast called Game of Crimes. We're both law enforcement guys, so we do this. But one of the people I interviewed was Ed Davis, a buddy of mine. He's the commissioner at the time of the Boston Police Department when the Boston Marathon bombing happened. There was a reason they did not call it a terrorist attack at that point, because calling it a terrorist attack could have prevented small businesses from getting the assistance they needed, because there were terrorism-related clauses in insurance policies that would have prevented the payout in case it was terrorism-related. So exactly to your point, I think, Jonathan, I think that we have to be very careful. And of the way that I think this Ukraine war will also create a new way of looking at how we insure things, right? Because now you've got the physical and the logical world. You've got the cyber world. You've got the analog world. If I damage a building and it damages the other capability, is that the attack on the building? If it's the proximate cause of the damage to the network, and now I say is that a cyber attack? Is a physical attack different than a cyber attack? Even though the network goes down, in one instance, it's a building just exploded because of a gas line leak. Those are things that have happened, right? That would be covered under insurance. But the same amount of damage, the same effect because a bomb drops, we should treat that differently. So that's one of the biggest questions that are out there. And Mike Davis talked about, I agree, consequence-based risk management, not just chase threats. If you chase threats, you're like a dog chasing your tail. You're going to be spinning in circles. You're going to have a lot of motion, but you're never going to get anywhere. We really got to get back to what are the consequences that our businesses face, and let's address those things. You can't do this what if stuff. Well, what if this happens and what if this happens? I have a saying, and I won't use the French version of it, but what if worms have machine guns? Birds wouldn't F with them, right? You could what if all you want. You just got to get down to the reality of it. And then Jonathan also asks, he says he agrees about the fear tactic, the dangers of knee-jerk reaction, but he'd love for people to see a cyber issue in the news, and then they go change the password, set up MFA with the same fever they purchased toilet paper and milk. Amen, brother. If we could only get people to take that as seriously, you know what we ought to do? We ought to say, the password on your toilet paper roll has been compromised. We need to change your password. But that's the other thing too. It's how many of you, here's the other thing too. For you folks that are on Facebook or even LinkedIn, How many times people say your account's been hacked? You got to go change your password. No, my account has not been hacked. Somebody just impersonated me. I've got my settings, privacy settings on Facebook locked down. That's why somebody said, hey, there's somebody's trying to impersonate you. Notice I don't have my profile pic because I have it locked down. Unless you send me an invite and I accept it, then you get to see a lot of the stuff. Same thing on LinkedIn. There are a lot of false profiles on LinkedIn. And it doesn't mean that I need to go change my password. So making sure we have the right context for it. But I would say back, you know what we ought to do? This goes back to teaching kids in schools. We ought to go back and teach kids in school right from the start, the same way my kids, when they were growing up, they had to grow up with a trooper dad, back there, and a police detective. We wore our seatbelts everywhere we go. That's the only thing they knew. We had seatbelts everywhere we go. We ought to be doing the same thing in schools. There ought to be a standard curriculum about how to compute safely, about what you need to do with passwords, multi-factor authentication. The government's finally doing it, but we ought to get to the point to where just like intermittent or like anti-lock brakes, seat belts, airbags are mandatory safety equipment. We ought to build in mandatory safety on all sites. They have to be able to enable multi-factor authentication. Now, it doesn't stop everything, but what we want to do is we want to exact a price on the attackers. This is an economic issue. We want to make them pay such a price. It's easier to an attack account with just a username and a password than it is a username, password, and multi-factor authentication. We saw that in the SolarWinds. We saw that in the Office 365 approach, where they were able to actually go in and hijack the cookie that set the secure token to see whether or not you needed to use MFA or not. So all of those things, we should be looking at this in terms of how we respond to that. But the biggest thing we have to do is start tamping down the FUD, start tamping down the misinformation, and simply, I think it's more reasonable to say, look, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I just went out to a pistol course over the weekend, former Special Forces guys. We're learning different tactics, shooting from behind barricades. But the biggest thing is the fastest draw in the Old West doesn't win. It's the smoothest draw. It's the most accurate draw. That's what wins. So we've got to quit telling people, you got to do something, run around, whatever it is, just do something. No. Let's be deliberate. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Let's be deliberate about the things we do. Let's secure the things we ought to secure. Let's fix the things that needs to be fixed, but let's not cause chaos and panic in everybody, because if your leader is chaotic, if your leader's giving you bad information, they usually set the tone down. So Kim, again, we could go, probably 10 different directions with this. Same thing with Jonathan, 100% on the cyber school safety programs. He's working on that. Rock on, my man.
Yeah, Jonathan's pretty awesome. He has his SOC operations ran by the students at University of Tulsa. So that's pretty cool. He co-hosts the show sometimes for me. So Jonathan's doing all kinds of great things out there. But I think you're right. I think it's just going back to the basics and making sure, you have a backup plan. Like I did not have a backup plan when my mic just went out on this show. My backup plan was you covered for me. But I think it is just simple stuff that, hopefully these messages that, cybersecurity, it is in the forefront of the news right now. And I had a guest on last week, and, it's just our world. It seems like we're talking about cybersecurity. And when people ask me, what do you do? Usually their reaction is, oh, you must be really busy. They don't really care what I do. They don't really care about cybersecurity, until something happens to them.
Yeah, speaking of backup plans, I just thought I'd give a quick example. You're right, you have to have backup plans. So on a lot of my accounts that are multi-factor, I can get it through, I have the recovery code saved, I have the Authenticator app, I can get it by SMS, and then the other thing too, and many of you guys have used things like this, the security keys, the UB keys. Look, basically I'm a solo operator. I can't afford to get locked out of stuff. I need to have multiple ways to get into it. But what this is a Swiss toolkit for me. I simply look at it, I go, okay, my regular way didn't work. What's my plan B? That didn't work. Okay, no problem. What's my plan C? There's a reason there are 26 letters in the alphabet. That's how many plans, you could literally have. You don't need that many. Most of the time you can get into it, but if all else doesn't work, I can get in because I've got something that I control physically here at home. In most of these accounts, they accept the security key, and I can do that. So the fun part is really what it is. It's actually kind of fun to do the planning because you do have to think, what are the different ways you can do this? But I quit doing scenario planning and I started saying, If I opened up my MacGyver belt, if I opened up my tool belt and I saw what I had, what are the different things I could do? MacGyver was the perfect capabilities place planner. That's the one you wanted. Didn't matter the scenario. He would simply look around and say, what do we have? What can I use? And then let's build something from there. It wasn't like, well, hey, hold on, I'm going to run to Home Depot. I got to get 4 things. Sorry, pal, can't afford. You got to solve this problem right in under an hour. So what did MacGyver do? He used what it was ever around him. So, and actually, there's a great stat too by Mike Davis. Microsoft states that any form of MFA reduces automated threats by 99.9%. I don't know if I don't know the accuracy of that stat. Of course, it's Microsoft and it's marketing. I got good buddies at Microsoft and run their criminal justice stuff. But that's the point. Automated threats reduces 99.9% of those because guess what? I think it's still the same number. The number of default passwords in the world that come out from manufacturers. That's why the denial of service attack, the one that was launched, the biggest one that we ever had on record, that was basically done by attacking networked devices, IoT devices, and what it was able to do was go in and automate and just simply scan for those 67 passwords, and it was one of them, brute force them. So yeah, it reduces the automated threats. And look, there's a site out there. Many of you guys have seen it. Maybe it's called Two-Factor Auth, TWOFACTORAUTH.org. Two-factorauth.org. That gives you, and they've done a really good job of cataloging financial sites, social media sites, whatever it is, all of the ones that support two-factor and multi-factor authentication. And then better yet, they put the link in there to click to tell you where to go in order to secure your account. So I just think that there's a lot of good stuff out there that is still to be done. But again, biggest piece of advice I can give you, take a breath, slow down. We're not storming the beaches at Normandy. Have a plan, be deliberate about it, constantly assess your readiness. And all you have to do is be prepared. Look, when I was a cop, when I was a state trooper, I'd be out 20 miles from my nearest backup. Literally, that's all I had to handle whatever was out there with what I had on my belt. And that's why we were taught many different things from defense tactics. You got to learn when to back off. We didn't even have handheld radios at the time. So I had to be able to get back to my car, get to the mic, whatever it was. You had to figure it out. There was no cavalry coming over the hill in the next 30 seconds.
So with everything that's happened in Ukraine, do you think that they were prepared as far as financially and the banks? And, I don't, this is just my take. I don't believe they thought it was going to happen, so how prepared should one be when it comes to financial and, just making sure if something were going to happen, you're going to be financially okay?
Yeah, again, I don't want a Monday morning quarterback, but if I'm watching the news and I'm watching what people say, to your point exactly, Kim, they didn't think it was going to happen. Wrong attitude to have. What they should have been saying is that, look, we hope they don't invade, but if they do, these are the things we need to be doing now. You need to be doing X, Y, and Z. We hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. That should have been the message every single day, because people did get caught without access to the banking stuff. They got caught without the required, I think, number of days so they could survive. I mean, when you see the news media over there and they're doing these reports of the people, they're without power, they're without water, they're trying to figure out where are we going to get water from. I mean, I think, again, I just want to stop there. I don't want a Monday morning quarterback anything. All I can go off is the news reports, but what I saw in the news was not the attitude I wish they would have had, which is, hey, look, if they come, they come. I personally can't stop that, but what I can do is I can be prepared is if they come, and we're going to be prepared. We are going to do what we can to be the least amount of burden on our government that we can. And I think it goes back to the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. A lot of times 20% of the people consume 80% of the government resources. I don't want to be one of the 20%. I want to be one of the people that says, I'm going to make it easy for the government to take their time and attention and focus on stuff. I'm going to be self-reliant, self-sufficient. But if there's one thing I would have changed, it definitely would have been the messaging and the state of preparation prior to the invasion.
So what do you think? We're almost up on the hour here. Any foresight advice? I know you've been giving advice of what we might be seeing in the next, weeks, days, minutes.
Yeah. Look, none of us can control what Russia will do. None of us can control what China will do. or Iran or North Korea. We cannot control that. What we can control is our responses to it. What we can control is our preparation for it. So I simply go back to that. I would prepare your business the same way you would prepare your home. At home, can you operate for as long as your business can? And if one of them can operate longer than the other, you've got a problem, because one of them is going to suffer. If your business can go for 5 to 7 days, but you only have 2 hours of food, something's going to suffer, right? So you've got to look at your level of preparation to say, will I be able to focus my time and attention on making sure the family's safe, at the same time reconstituting business services over here? What you want to do is lessen the number of things you have to worry about controlling, and you simplify your battle plan. If I can say it that way, simplify your battle plan. Right? You want it. Eisenhower had a great line too. Eisenhower, by the way, born in Abilene, Kansas farm boy like me. Actually, Abilene is 6 miles from my little boyhood hometown of Chapman, Kansas. But Eisenhower Eisenhower was not a good regular soldier. Like he was, was he the best shot? No. I mean, was he the best at PT? Absolutely not. Eisenhower was a strategist, but he said plans are worthless, but planning is invaluable. If you have a plan on your shelf and it's sitting there, it's worthless. That plan is worthless. It's usually dated. But you don't have to overdo it. In other words, you don't want that fatigue, but simply every 30 days going, hey, look, has the state of the world changed? Is there anything in our plan we ought to think about? We ought to change. You don't have to have a huge planning meeting, but simply knowing your major things that you're looking at. For example, if there's a new type of threat, you're probably already addressing that. So the question is, do we have a good visibility of what our enterprise is like? Should we be thinking about, if an event were to happen, what things could we shut off immediately so we don't have to worry about those and still be able to maintain and operate over here? The smaller of a business you are, the more latitude you have. The bigger of a business, it's very difficult to do those things. So just knowing what things, and it's like a fire. It's like having a fire department. Look, I got to tell you, if you live 50 miles from the nearest fire department, what you better do is worry about which buildings do you want them to save, because they cannot save all 5 buildings. They can only save 1 by the time they get there, and it may only be the foundation. So being able to survive, being able to have the right things in place so that you can survive long enough for help to get there is really, it's the basis of all planning. A fire safe is not designed to survive indefinitely. It's designed to survive long enough for the fire department to get there and put it out so that it can recover. Black boxes in airplanes, as we saw what happened in China, that plane that incredibly, just horrendous, dives 29,000 feet in 90 seconds. The black boxes still survived that. So they did their job, so just make sure things are there to do their job. And sometimes good enough is good enough. Don't over prepare. Don't overthink the problem. Good enough is good enough. And then give yourself the flexibility to operate and make different decisions based on new information that comes in. Don't have such a dogma that says, hey, well, we have to do it this way. No, you do it that way until circumstances change to where we say, let's rethink. Should we be doing this? Should we be doing this? Give yourself the flexibility to change your planning on a constant basis.
And Morgan, if people want to, hear more about your opinions, your views, everything you're doing, we have about 2 minutes. What's coming up next for you? Where can people find you? And
well, again, I'm Chief Security Advisor for SentinelOne.com. Somebody said good acquisition. We agree. TiVo identity is the next area. So just SentinelOne.com. I'll be on the news. I'm non-denominational. I've done many different things. And then at Morgan Wright _US is where I do some of the stuff on Twitter. But hey, look, just Google me if you can't find me. You're not trying hard enough.
And I guess the last thing is there any? I know you gave us a lot of advice, but in a couple of words, one thing someone can do different today that they weren't doing yesterday.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Keep the main thing the main thing. Don't sweat the small stuff. Big picture. And last piece of advice, you take the world as you find it, not as you wish it was. Don't do this well, why did he do this? Well, if it only he'd done this, doesn't matter. Get your plan, work your plan, assess your plan, revise your plan as needed.
And if people want to stay away from cybersecurity for a minute, you want to tell someone in like 20 seconds about your podcast you're doing right now.
gameofcrimespodcast.com. We interview the people who have actually lived it. We don't do murder porn. We don't do talk about murder cases. We talk about the people. We had George Young. We've had Dave Reichert, Green River Killer, Ed Davis, Boston Police Commissioner. We've had money launderers. You name it. We talk to the people who are the real deal, the people who have actually lived the life, who lived the stories, and we help them tell their stories. gameofcrimespodcast.com, and you can find us on Apple, Game of Crimes.
Okay, Morgan Wright, Chief Security Advisor for SentinelOne. Thank you so much, Morgan, for spending the last hour with us. Thanks for helping me out with my technical issue. Thank you, everyone, for joining another episode of And Security for All. I hope you guys all have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay secure, and we'll see you next week.